Welcome to Mystic Bedtime Stories, where ancient whispers guide you into peaceful slumber. I'm your narrator tonight, and I invite you to settle into your most comfortable position as we embark on a gentle journey through time, back to the very cradle of human civilization. Not close your eyes and let your breathing slow naturally. Tonight, we travel to a time when the world was young, when the first cities rose from fertile plains, and when humanity took its first steps toward the civilization we know today. This is the story of the Sumerians, the first people to call themselves civilized, and their remarkable legacy that still touches our lives today. Picture yourself floating gently above the ancient landscape of Mesopotamia, that blessed land between two mighty rivers. Below you stretches the Tigris and Euphrates, their waters flowing like liquid silver through endless plains of green barley and wheat. The morning sun casts long shadows across irrigation channels that web the landscape like veins, bringing life to what was once barren desert. This is 5,000 years ago, when mammoths still roamed distant lands and the pyramids of Egypt were yet to be built. Here, in this river valley, something extraordinary is happening. For the first time in human history, people are gathering not just in small family groups or modest villages, but in great numbers. They are building something unprecedented, something that will forever change the course of human destiny. The air is warm and carries the scent of fresh bread from clay ovens, the earthy smell of wet fields, and the subtle fragrance of date palms swaying in the morning breeze. You can hear the distant lowing of cattle, the gentle splash of water being drawn from wells, and the soft murmur of human voices beginning their daily routines. As we drift closer to this ancient world, you notice the remarkable transformation of the landscape. Where once there might have been only wilderness, now there are organized fields, straight roads, and most remarkably of all, structures of mud brick rising higher than any human habitation has ever reached before. These are not mere shelters, but permanent homes, workshops, temples, and palaces that speak of a people who have learned to work together on a scale never before imagined. The Sumerians called this region the land of the black-headed people, and they saw themselves as the chosen ones, placed between the realm of the gods above and the underworld below. They believed they were created to serve the gods, but in doing so, they created something far greater than they could have imagined. They created civilization itself. Here, in the warm morning light filtering through the mist rising from the rivers, writing was born. Here, the first laws were carved in stone. Here, the wheel turned for the first time, and here, the first cities welcomed their first citizens. The Sumerians gave us the foundation of nearly everything we consider essential to human society: government, religion, education, art, and the very concept of urban life. As you relax deeper into comfort, allow yourself to become a silent witness to this ancient world. You are perfectly safe, perfectly calm, as we begin our journey through the morning mist of time. The gentle rhythm of the rivers will carry us through the story of humanity's first great adventure, the birth of civilization in the land called Sumer. Tonight, on Mystic Bedtime Stories, we will walk the first paved streets ever built. We will hear the first written words ever spoken, and we will witness the dawn of human cooperation on a scale that transformed scattered tribes into the builders of the world's first cities. Let the warm sun of ancient Mesopotamia wash over you as we begin this peaceful journey into the past, where every discovery awaits and every moment brings us closer to understanding the remarkable people who first dared to dream of civilization. The story begins now, in the soft light of dawn, 5,000 years ago, in the land between the rivers, where the first chapter of human history was written in clay and stone, and where the whispers of the Sumerians still echo across the centuries, calling us home to the very beginning of our shared human story. Take a deep breath and let yourself drift back further in time, to a moment when the world was very different from the one we know today. You are floating peacefully above the ancient landscape of southern Mesopotamia, in what we now call, but which was then the heart of a civilization that would change everything. Below you, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers wind their way through endless plains like two great serpents of life. These rivers are not just waterways, but the very arteries of existence for the people who will come to call this place home. The Sumerians named their land Ki-Engi, meaning the land of the noble lords, but we know it simply as Sumer, the place. Where civilization began, the land stretches out beneath you like a vast carpet of green and gold. In the rainy season, the rivers swell and overflow their banks, depositing rich, dark soil across the plains. This annual flooding, so predictable and so generous, will teach the people who live here their first lessons in cooperation and planning. They will learn to read the rhythms of the water, to predict its moods, and to work together to harness its power. As you drift lower, you begin to see the remarkable transformation that human hands have wrought upon this landscape. Where once there was only wild marsh and desert, now there are fields laid out in perfect rectangles, separated by raised banks of earth. These are not random patches of cultivation, but carefully planned agricultural systems that speak of a people who have learned to think beyond the immediate needs of survival. The irrigation channels that crisscross the land like a vast spider web are perhaps humanity's first great engineering achievement. Each channel has been carefully surveyed and dug, its depth and width calculated to carry exactly the right amount of water to exactly the right place. The Sumerians call these channels the life-giving arteries of the land, and they are right. Without them, this region would be nothing more than desert and swamp. Watch as the morning sun illuminates the water in these channels, turning them into ribbons of light that connect field to field, village to village. The water flows not by accident, but by design, controlled by a system of gates and locks that can direct the precious liquid wherever it is needed most. This is cooperation on a scale never before seen, requiring hundreds of people to work together, to trust each other, and to share both the labor and the benefits of their collective effort. The geography of Sumer is perfectly suited to this great experiment in human cooperation. The land is flat, making it easy to dig channels and move water across great distances. The soil is rich and deep, renewed each year by the river's gifts. The climate is warm and sunny, perfect for growing barley, wheat, and dates. But perhaps most importantly, the land is open, with few natural barriers to separate one community from another. This openness encourages interaction, trade, and the sharing of ideas. A farmer in one village can easily travel to another village to exchange his grain for pottery or tools. A craftsman can take his wares to distant markets. Ideas, techniques, and innovations spread quickly across the land, creating a culture that is remarkably uniform, yet constantly evolving. The Sumerians believe that their land is the center of the world, and in many ways, they are right. Here, at the confluence of two great rivers, with fertile soil and a favorable climate, they have found the perfect conditions for human civilization to flourish. They see themselves as the chosen people, placed in this blessed land by the gods themselves to create something new and wonderful. As you float peacefully above this ancient landscape, you can sense the energy and optimism of the people below. They are discovering that when humans work together, when they pool their knowledge and their labor, they can accomplish things that would be impossible for any individual. They are learning that cooperation is not just useful, but essential, not just for survival, but for prosperity. The rivers below continue their eternal journey to the sea, carrying with them the silt that will create new land, new opportunities, new possibilities. Just as the rivers shape the landscape, the people of Sumer are shaping the future of humanity. They are writing the first chapter in the long story of civilization, and every page they write will influence every chapter that follows. In the gentle, warmth of the ancient sun, with the soft sound of water flowing through countless channels. You can feel the deep contentment of a people who have found their place in the world. They have learned to read the land, to work with the rivers rather than against them, and to create abundance where once there was only wilderness. This is Sumer, the land between the rivers, where the first cities will rise, where the first words will be written, and where the first laws will be carved in stone. It is the foundation upon which all future civilizations will build. The fertile ground from which the tree of human culture will grow. Rest now in the peaceful knowledge that you are witnessing the very beginning of the human story, the first tentative steps toward the complex, interconnected world we know today. The Sumerians are about to embark on the greatest adventure in human history, and you are here to witness it all, floating gently above the land between the rivers, where it all began. The soft murmur of flowing water continues, carrying you deeper into peaceful sleep, while the ancient land of Sumer spreads out below you like a promise of all the wonders yet to come. In this place, at this time, everything is possible, and the future of humanity is being written in the rich, dark soil of the land between the rivers. In the gentle embrace of dawn, as the first light touches the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, we find ourselves approaching the walls of Uruk. This ancient city rises from the earth like a dream made manifest, its mud brick walls catching the golden rays of the morning sun. Here, in this sacred place, humanity took its first bold steps toward civilization, creating something the world had never seen before. Uruk stands as a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. By the year 3000 before the Common Era, this remarkable settlement had grown to house more than 50,000 souls within its protective embrace. Imagine, if you will, walking through its ancient streets for the first time. The air would be filled with the sounds of daily life, the gentle murmur of voices speaking in humanity's oldest recorded language, the rhythmic hammering of craftsmen at their work, and the soft shuffle of sandaled feet on worn pathways. City stretches before us like a vast tapestry woven from human dreams and determination. Its streets wind between buildings that tower above the surrounding countryside, structures that would have seemed miraculous to the scattered farming communities of the time. These are not mere shelters, but carefully planned constructions that speak of a society learning to organize itself in ways never before attempted. At the heart of Uruk stands the great temple complex, its walls rising toward the heavens like a mountain crafted by human hands. The Anu district, named for the sky god himself, dominates the cityscape with its imposing presence. Here, the priests and priestesses conduct their ancient rituals, maintaining the delicate balance between the earthly realm and the divine. The temple's courtyards echo with the soft chanting of prayers, the gentle clinking of offerings, and the whispered hopes of citizens seeking blessing from their gods. Walking through the residential quarters, we encounter the daily rhythm of urban life. Families gather in courtyards where children play with clay toys shaped like animals, their laughter mixing with the gentle cooing of doves that nest in the building's eaves. Women sit together, spinning thread and sharing stories passed down through generations, their voices creating a comforting backdrop to the peaceful evening air. The workshops and marketplaces of Uruk buzz with quiet activity. Potters shape clay with practiced hands, their wheels turning slowly as vessels take form beneath skilled fingers. Metal workers carefully tend their fires, coaxing copper and bronze into tools and ornaments that will outlast the hands that made them. Textile workers weave intricate patterns into cloth, creating garments that speak of prosperity and artistic achievement. In the marketplace, merchants from distant lands display their wares beneath reed canopies. Obsidian from far-off mountains catches the light like captured starlight, while aromatic spices from unknown regions perfume the air with exotic fragrances. The gentle haggling of traders mingles with the soft bleating of sheep and the low murmur of oxen, creating a symphony of commerce that would become the soundtrack of civilization. The administrative buildings of Uruk represent another revolutionary development in human organization. Here, scribes keep careful records on clay tablets, documenting everything from grain stores to trade agreements. Their styluses move across wet clay with deliberate precision, creating marks that will preserve human thoughts and transactions for millennia to come. These quiet scholars work by the light of oil lamps, their concentration absolute as they chronicle the birth of history itself. The walls of Uruk stretch for miles, embracing the city like protective arms, built from millions of mud bricks each, one shaped by human hands and dried under the Mesopotamian sun. These fortifications represent a collective effort that speaks to the unity and determination of the city's inhabitants. Guards walk the ramparts in the cool evening air, their bronze weapons gleaming softly in the twilight as they watch over the sleeping city below. As night falls over Uruk, the city transforms into a constellation of warm light scattered across the dark plain. Oil lamps flicker in windows, casting dancing shadows on ancient walls. The sounds of the day give way to the gentler rhythms of evening. Families gather for their evening meals, sharing bread and telling stories while the stars begin to appear in the vast sky above. The canals that bring life to Uruk flow softly through the city, their waters reflecting the moon and stars like liquid silver. These waterways represent one of humanity's first great engineering achievements, a system of channels and reservoirs that transforms the harsh landscape into a garden of plenty. The gentle lapping of water against stone creates a soothing lullaby that accompanies the city's rest. In the sacred precincts of the temple, the eternal flames burn steadily through the night, tended by devoted priests who maintain the connection between earth and heaven. Their prayers rise like incense into the starlit sky, carrying the hopes and dreams of humanity's first great urban experiment toward the listening ears of the gods. Uruk stands as more than just a city. It represents humanity's first successful attempt to create a complex society, a place where thousands of individuals could live and work together in harmony. Here, the foundations of civilization were laid stone by stone, idea by idea, dream by dream. The legacy of this ancient place would ripple outward through time, inspiring countless generations to build upon what these first urban dwellers had begun. As we take our leave of Uruk in the gentle hours before dawn, we carry with us the knowledge that we have witnessed something truly extraordinary. This was the place where humanity first learned to dream collectively, where individual ambitions merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. In the quiet darkness before the sun rises once again, we can almost hear the whispers of those ancient builders, their voices carried on the desert wind, telling us that every great journey begins with a single step, and every civilization with a single dream made real. In the quiet scribal chambers of ancient Uruk, where oil lamps cast gentle shadows on mud brick walls, a revolution was taking place that would forever change the course of human history. Here, in these peaceful rooms filled with the earthy scent of wet clay, scribes were performing what seemed like magic, capturing human thoughts and preserving them for eternity. They were creating the world's first writing system, a gift to humanity that would outlast empires and echo through the ages. The story of cuneiform begins not with grand proclamations or royal decrees, but with the simple, practical needs of a growing civilization. In the fertile fields surrounding Uruk, farmers were harvesting grain in quantities never before imagined. Merchants were trading goods across vast distances, their caravans carrying precious commodities from distant lands. Temple administrators needed to keep track of offerings, taxes, and the complex distribution of resources that kept the city alive and thriving. At first, these early record keepers used simple tokens, small clay objects shaped like the items they represented. A cone-shaped token might represent a measure of grain, while a cylinder could stand for a jar of oil. These tokens were pressed into soft clay envelopes, creating impressions that served as the earliest form of accounting. But as society grew more complex, so too did the need for more sophisticated methods of record-keeping. The breakthrough came when scribes realized they could make the same impressions directly onto flat clay tablets without the need for tokens. Using a reed stylus cut from the marshes that surrounded their city, they began pressing triangular marks into wet clay. The shape of these marks, resembling small wedges, would eventually give this writing system its name, cuneiform, from the Latin word for wedge. In the gentle hours of early morning, when the air was cool and the clay was at its most workable, scribes would prepare their tablets with meticulous care. They would knead the clay until it reached the perfect consistency, smooth and pliable, ready to receive the marks that would transform it from mere earth into a vessel for human thought. The tablets were shaped by hand, each one carefully proportioned to hold the intended message, whether it was a simple inventory or a complex legal document. The act of writing itself was a meditation, a dance between mind and hand that required years of training to master. The scribe would hold the reed stylus at precisely the right angle, pressing it into the clay with just enough force to create clear, distinct marks. Each character was composed of combinations of wedges, some horizontal, some vertical, some diagonal, all arranged in patterns that the trained eye could read as easily as we read printed words today. The earliest cuneiform texts were practical documents, records of barley and sheep, transactions and contracts that kept the wheels of commerce turning smoothly. But as the scribes grew more skilled and the writing system more sophisticated, they began to capture more than just numbers and names. They started to record stories, prayers, and eventually entire epics that would survive for thousands of years. In the temple schools of Uruk, young students learned the sacred art of writing by copying exercises on practice tablets. They would spend hours tracing the same characters over and over, their small hands guided by patient teachers who had themselves learned the craft through years of dedicated study. The soft scratching of styluses on clay created a gentle rhythm. In these learning chambers, a sound that spoke of knowledge being passed from one generation to the next. As scribes became more confident in their abilities, they began to experiment with the possibilities of their new medium. They discovered that cuneiform could capture not just concrete objects, but abstract concepts as well. Words for love, justice, wisdom, and sorrow found their way onto clay tablets, expanding the scope of human expression in ways that had never before been possible. The creation of literary texts marked a turning point in human consciousness. For the first time, stories could be preserved exactly as they were told, without the changes and variations that inevitably crept in through oral tradition. The great myths and legends of the Sumerian people were committed to clay, ensuring that future generations would know the deeds of heroes and the wisdom of sages. Royal scribes in palace workshops worked on more elaborate projects, creating historical records that would establish the legitimacy of rulers and preserve their achievements for posterity. These texts were often copied multiple times, with duplicates stored in different locations to ensure their survival. The act of writing had become not just a tool of administration, but a means of achieving a form of immortality. The influence of cuneiform writing extended far beyond the borders of Sumer. As trade networks expanded and diplomatic relations developed between different city-states, the need for a common writing system became apparent. Cuneiform tablets became the international language of diplomacy and commerce, carried by messengers across deserts and mountains to distant courts and marketplaces. In the quiet workshops where clay tablets were fired and hardened, craftsmen tended kilns that transformed fragile clay into durable ceramic. The gentle heat of these ovens ensured that the written words would survive for millennia, creating libraries of knowledge that would outlast the civilizations that created them. The soft crackling of firing clay provided a fitting soundtrack to this process of preservation, as human thoughts were transformed into permanent records. The development of cuneiform also led to the creation of the first schools and the professionalization of learning. Young men from wealthy families would spend years mastering the complex art of writing, learning not just the technical skills, but also the cultural knowledge that made them valuable members of society. These scribal schools became centers of learning where mathematics, astronomy, and literature were taught alongside the practical skills of record-keeping. As the sun sets over the ancient city of Uruk, we can imagine the scribes carefully storing their completed tablets in reed baskets, organizing them by subject and date for future reference. The soft rustle of dried reeds mingles with the gentle sounds of evening as these guardians of human knowledge prepare for rest, knowing that they have contributed to something far greater than themselves. The legacy of cuneiform writing cannot be overstated. It represents humanity's first successful attempt to externalize memory, to create a permanent record of thoughts and experiences that could be shared across time and space. In those quiet scribal chambers, lit by the warm glow of oil lamps, the foundation was laid for all future systems of writing, learning, and knowledge preservation. As we leave the world of ancient scribes and their clay tablets, we carry with us an appreciation for the courage and vision of those who first dared to capture human speech in permanent form. Their patient work, stylus mark by stylus mark, created the bridge between the oral traditions of the past and the written cultures of the future, ensuring that the voice of humanity would never again be lost to the silence of time. In the heart of every great Sumerian city, rising from the dusty plains like a mountain crafted by divine hands, stands the ziggurat. These magnificent stepped pyramids, built brick by brick with infinite patience and devotion, represent humanity's most ambitious attempt to reach toward the heavens and touch the realm of the gods. As the morning mist clings to their ancient terraces, we can sense the profound spiritual yearning that drove entire communities to dedicate their lives to these monumental acts of faith. The ziggurat begins its journey skyward from a massive, rectangular base, its foundation stones laid with ceremonial precision by master builders who understood that they were creating more than mere architecture. They were constructing a sacred bridge between the world of mortals and the dwelling place of the divine. Each level of the structure grows smaller as it ascends, creating a series of terraces that seem to climb toward the clouds themselves, inviting the gods to descend and meet their earthly children halfway. The construction of a ziggurat required the coordinated efforts of an entire city. Thousands of workers toiled under the gentle guidance of skilled architects, their hands shaping millions of mud bricks that would be dried under the Mesopotamian sun. The rhythmic sound of construction filled the air from dawn to dusk, a symphony of human cooperation that spoke of shared purpose and collective devotion. Men carried heavy baskets of clay, while women mixed straw and water to create this mortar that would bind the structure together for millennia. As we approach the base of the great ziggurat of Uruk, dedicated to the moon god Nana, we can feel the weight of its spiritual significance pressing gently upon our consciousness. The lowest terrace stretches before us like a vast courtyard, its walls rising smoothly from the earth in perfect proportion. Here, pilgrims from distant cities would gather to begin their sacred ascent, their voices joining in soft prayers and hymns that echoed off the massive walls. The first level of the ziggurat serves as both foundation and gathering place, its broad expanse providing room for religious ceremonies and communal celebrations. During festival days, the sound of drums and singing would fill this sacred space, while the scent of burning incense drifted upward toward the higher levels. Priests in flowing robes would move through the crowds, blessing the faithful and preparing offerings for the gods who dwelt in the temple at the Ziggurat summit. The stairways that lead to the upper levels are marvels of engineering and artistry, their steps carved with the same precision that the scribes used when forming cuneiform characters. These ancient pathways, worn smooth by countless feet over the centuries, guide the faithful upward in a slow, meditative procession. The act of climbing itself becomes a form of prayer, each step bringing the worshipper closer to the divine presence that awaits above. On the second terrace, the world begins to take on a different quality. The sounds of the city below grow muted, replaced by the gentle whisper of wind through the structure's carefully planned passages. Gardens planted with sacred trees and flowers create pockets of green life against the backdrop of sun-baked brick, their leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. These hanging gardens, watered by an ingenious system of channels and reservoirs, represent paradise itself, a glimpse of the divine realm that awaits the faithful. The third level brings us closer still to the heavens, its smaller dimensions, creating a sense of intimacy and focus that prepares the soul for divine encounter. Here, the air seems thinner, cleaner, touched by the same winds that stir the garments of the gods. The view from this height encompasses the entire city below, with its network of canals gleaming like silver threads in the afternoon sun. From this vantage point, the daily concerns of earthly life begin to fade, replaced by a growing awareness of the eternal. At the summit of the ziggurat stands the most sacred space of all, the temple where the god or goddess of the city maintains their earthly residence. This small but perfectly proportioned building, constructed of the finest materials and decorated with the most precious ornaments, serves as a meeting place between mortal and divine. The walls are adorned with gold and lapis lazuli, creating surfaces that catch and reflect the light of sacred flames that burn eternally within. The high priest and priestess who serve in this elevated sanctuary undergo years of training and purification to prepare for their sacred duties. They move through their daily rituals with the grace of dancers, their every gesture imbued with meaning and reverence. The soft chanting of prayers drifts down from the temple like gentle rain, blessing all who hear it and creating a constant connection between heaven and earth. During the quiet hours of dawn and dusk, when the light is soft and the air is still, the ziggurat seems to pulse with spiritual energy. The massive structure appears to breathe, its shadow moving slowly across the surrounding plaza as the sun traces its ancient path across the sky. These are the moments when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grows thin, when mortals might catch a glimpse of the divine presence that dwells within these sacred walls. The ziggurat also serves as a center of learning and astronomical observation. From its heights, priest astronomers study the movements of stars and planets, recording their observations on clay tablets that will guide agricultural activities and religious festivals. The regular patterns of celestial bodies provide a comforting rhythm to life below, a reminder that the universe itself follows divine order and purpose. The acoustic properties of the ziggurat create a unique environment for prayer and meditation. Sounds echo and reverberate through the structure in ways that seem to amplify their spiritual power. The gentle murmur of prayers spoken at the base can be heard clearly at the summit, while the responses of the gods, channeled through their earthly representatives, carry down to the faithful below with crystal clarity. As night falls over the ziggurat, torches are lit at regular intervals along the stairways and terraces, transforming the structure into a beacon that can be seen for miles across the dark plain. The warm glow of these flames creates a sense of welcome and protection, assuring the city's inhabitants that their gods are watching over them through the long hours of darkness. The gentle crackling of the torches provides a soothing soundtrack to the night, a reminder that the sacred fire burns eternally in the temple above. The ziggurat stands as more than just a building. It represents humanity's deepest spiritual aspirations, made manifest in stone and brick. It embodies the belief that the distance between earth and heaven is not insurmountable, that through faith, devotion, and collective effort, mortals can create a place where the divine chooses to dwell. In its soaring lines and carefully proportioned spaces, we see reflected the Sumerian understanding that the sacred and the mundane are not separate realms, but different aspects of a single, unified reality. As we descend from the Ziggurats' sacred heights, our steps echoing softly on the ancient stones, we carry with us the memory of having stood at the threshold between two worlds. The structure remains behind us, still reaching toward the stars, still serving as a bridge between the earthly and the eternal. In the gentle darkness that surrounds us, we can feel the presence of those who built this marvel, their spirits still ascending and descending these sacred steps, forever engaged in the eternal dance between heaven and earth. As we settle deeper into our journey through ancient Mesopotamia, let us pause by the sacred waters of the Tigris, where the evening light casts long shadows across the reed beds. Here, in this timeless landscape, we can almost hear the whispered prayers of the first urban dwellers, those brave souls who dared to build their lives beneath the watchful gaze of powers far greater than themselves. The Sumerians understood something profound about existence that we, in our modern world, sometimes forget. They knew that life was not a solitary journey, but a constant conversation with forces beyond their comprehension. Every sunrise brought fresh negotiations. Every harvest required careful diplomacy. Every storm demanded humble acknowledgement of powers that could either nurture or destroy. Picture, if you will, a Sumerian farmer rising before dawn, the cool morning air carrying the scent of date palms and the distant sound of temple bells. Before he touches his plow, before he examines his irrigation channels, he speaks softly to the heavens, not in desperation, but in the practiced manner of someone who has learned that respect for the divine is the foundation of all earthly prosperity. This was a civilization that lived with the constant awareness that they were part of something vast and interconnected. The gods were not distant abstractions, dwelling in some unreachable realm. They were immediate, present, involved in the daily affairs of mortals. They had preferences, emotions, needs. They could be pleased or disappointed, generous or withholding. At the apex of this divine hierarchy stood Enlil, the lord of wind and storm, the master of the space between earth and sky. He was the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon and the patron deity of the city of Nippur. Imagine him as the Sumerians did, a figure of immense power, capable of bringing life-giving rains or devastating floods with equal ease. His breath was the wind that filled the sails of merchant vessels and rustled through the barley fields. His voice was the thunder that rolled across the flat expanse of Mesopotamia, carrying both promise and warning. Enlil's temple in Nippur was the spiritual heart of the Sumerian world. Pilgrims would journey for weeks across the dusty plains to stand before his altar, bringing offerings of grain, livestock, and finely crafted goods. The temple priests, draped in white linen and speaking in the ancient liturgical language, would intercede on behalf of the people, ensuring that the great god's favor continued to smile upon their endeavors. But Enlil, for all his power, was not a solitary deity. His primary consort was Ninlil, the goddess of the south wind, whose gentle breezes brought relief from the harsh summer heat. Together, they embodied the eternal dance between masculine and feminine forces, between the commanding power of the storm and the nurturing embrace of the gentle wind. Their union was seen as essential for the proper functioning of the natural world. As the night deepens around us, let us turn our attention to one of the most beloved figures in the Sumerian pantheon, Utu, the radiant god of the sun. Utu was a sun god and god of justice, and his daily journey across the sky was seen as both a physical and moral necessity. Each morning, he would emerge from the eastern mountains, his golden light slowly spreading across the land, awakening farmers to their work and merchants to their travels. But Utu's role extended far beyond simply providing light and warmth. He was the great witness, the one who saw all that transpired beneath his blazing gaze. No lie could be spoken, no injustice committed, no secret kept that escaped his notice. In the law courts of Sumerian cities, oaths were sworn in Utu's name, and justice was administered under his divine authority. His light was truth itself, piercing through deception and illuminating the path of righteousness. The Sumerians believed that Utu's courthouse lay in the underworld, where he would judge the souls of the dead during the hours of darkness. This dual role as both life-giver and judge made him a figure of both comfort and awe. Parents would teach their children that Utu was always watching, not as a stern disciplinarian, but as a benevolent guardian who wanted humanity to flourish in harmony and truth. At an early period of Sumerian history, Utu was regarded to be the twin brother of Inanna. This relationship between the sun god and the goddess of love and war reflects the Sumerian understanding of the complex nature of existence: light and passion, justice and desire, order and chaos. These were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of a greater cosmic dance. Now, as the evening star begins to shine above us, we come to perhaps the most captivating figure in the entire Sumerian pantheon: Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth. Inanna was believed to be the planet Venus, that brilliant celestial body. It appears as both the morning star and the evening star, herald of both dawn and dusk. Inanna embodied contradictions that the Sumerians found not troubling but profound. She was the goddess of love and war, of fertility and destruction, of sacred marriage and fierce independence. In her, the Sumerians saw the full spectrum of feminine power, not sanitized or simplified, but acknowledged in all its complexity and potency. Picture her as the ancient hymns describe: a goddess who could stride across battlefields with the ferocity of a lioness, her weapons flashing in the sunlight, her war cry echoing across the plains. Yet this same deity could also be found in the sacred marriage chamber, blessing the union of lovers, ensuring the fertility of crops and herds, nurturing the tender shoots of new life. The stories of Inanna's exploits were told and retold around evening fires, each narrative revealing another facet of her multifaceted nature. She was known to descend to the underworld to challenge her sister Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead, in a tale that spoke to the eternal cycle of death and rebirth, of seasons ending and beginning anew. Young women would invoke Inanna's name when they desired love, while warriors would seek her blessing before battle. She was the patron of Uruk, that first great city of the world, and her temple there was a place of pilgrimage for those seeking her favor. The sacred prostitutes who served in her temple were not seen as degraded, but as honored servants participating in the divine mystery of creation itself. As we drift further into the peaceful embrace of this ancient night, let us also remember Nanna, the moon god, whose gentle light illuminates our imaginary journey through Sumerian theology. Nanna was the Sumerian god of the full moon and wisdom, father of Inanna in some stories, and father, with Ningal, of Utu, Shamash, the sun god. His silver light was seen as the perfect complement to his sun's golden radiance, together providing humanity with the rhythm of days and nights, months and seasons. Nanna's temple in Ur was one of the most magnificent structures in the ancient world, its ziggurat rising like a mountain toward the stars. During the full moon, pilgrims would gather in its courtyard, their faces turned upward toward the luminous orb that represented their god's benevolent presence. The priests would recite the lunar calendar, marking the proper times for planting and harvesting, for religious festivals and legal proceedings. The Sumerians understood that Nanna's cycles were intimately connected to the rhythms of life itself. Women tracked their fertility by his phases. Farmers planted their crops according to his calendar. And the great festivals of the year were timed to coincide with his most powerful manifestations. He was wisdom itself, the patient accumulation of knowledge that comes from careful observation of natural patterns. In the deeper waters of the cosmic ocean, dwelling in the Abzu beneath the earth, resided Enki, the god of wisdom, water, and creation. The god Ea, whose Sumerian equivalent was Enki, is one of the three most powerful gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon, along with Anu and Enlil. His domain was the sweet water that bubbled up from springs and wells, the life-giving moisture. That made civilization possible in the arid landscape of Mesopotamia. Enki was known as the friend of humanity, the deity who had taught the first people the arts of civilization. He was credited with giving them the knowledge of writing, the secrets of brewing beer, the techniques of metal working, and the wisdom of healing. In the great flood myth that would later influence other cultures, it was Enki who secretly warned humanity of the coming deluge, ensuring that life would survive the god's wrath. His priests were the keepers of the sacred texts, the brewers of the temple beer, the skilled craftsmen who created the beautiful objects that adorned the temples and palaces. They understood that Enki's gifts came with the responsibility to use them wisely, to share knowledge rather than hoard it, to remember that human creativity was a divine trust. The relationship between the Sumerians and their gods was not one of abject fear or blind worship, but rather a sophisticated understanding of cosmic reciprocity. The gods needed humanity just as much as humanity needed the gods. The temples required daily offerings. The divine statues needed to be fed and clothed. The sacred rituals needed to be performed with precision and devotion. This was not because the gods were dependent in any weak sense, but because they had chosen to enter into a covenant with humanity. They had made the success of human civilization their own concern, and in return, they expected recognition, gratitude, and proper service. It was a relationship of mutual benefit, carefully maintained through centuries of tradition and practice. The daily rhythm of Sumerian life was punctuated by small acts of divine acknowledgement. A merchant would pour a libation of beer onto the ground before setting out on a journey, asking for safe passage. A mother would whisper a prayer to Nin-Her-Sag, the great mother goddess, before assisting at a birth. Nin-Her-Sag was worshipped as a mother goddess and was associated with fertility, nature, and life on earth. A scribe would invoke Nabu, the god of writing, before beginning an important document. These were not grand gestures, but quiet conversations, the ongoing dialogue between mortal and divine that characterized Sumerian spirituality. The Sumerians believed their gods lived in grand temples, overseeing human affairs with benevolence and might. They understood that the gods were not distant observers, but active participants in the human drama. As we continue our gentle journey through this ancient landscape of faith, we can almost sense the presence of these divine beings in the rustling of the palm fronds, in the soft lapping of the river against the reed boats, in the distant call of the night birds. The Sumerians lived in a world where the sacred and the mundane were seamlessly interwoven, where every action had cosmic significance, where humanity's relationship with the divine was not an abstract theology, but a lived reality. This was perhaps their greatest gift to the world, the understanding that human life is most meaningful when it is lived in conscious relationship with powers greater than ourselves. Whether we call these powers gods, nature, the universe, or something else entirely, the Sumerian insight remains profound. We are not alone in this vast cosmos, but part of an ongoing conversation between the mortal and the eternal, the human, and the divine. In the quiet of this ancient night, as the stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance, we can still hear the echo of those first prayers, those first attempts to reach across the void and touch the face of the infinite. The Sumerians knew that this reaching was not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. not dependence, but partnership in the great work of existence itself. And so, as we prepare to continue our journey through the mists of time, let us carry with us this Sumerian understanding that the universe is not a cold, indifferent place, but a realm of relationship, of ongoing dialogue, of sacred conversation between all the forces that shape our existence. In learning to listen to these ancient voices, we learn to hear the whispers of the eternal that still surround us today. As our journey through ancient Mesopotamia continues, we find ourselves drawn to the flickering light of an evening fire, where a temple scribe sits surrounded by carefully arranged clay tablets. The night air carries the distant sound of the Euphrates flowing past the great city of Uruk, and in the scribe's weathered hands lies one of humanity's most precious treasures, the world's first recorded epic poem, the story of Gilgamesh. In the gentle glow of oil lamps, let us settle into this timeless tale that has echoed through the centuries, speaking to the deepest questions of human existence. This is not merely an ancient story, but humanity's first attempt to grapple with the great mysteries that still occupy our hearts today: the nature of friendship, the meaning of mortality, and the endless human quest for something eternal in our brief lives. The epic tells the story of a king, Gilgamesh, whose mother is a goddess. He rules the city of Uruk with unmatched power, yet at the beginning of our tale, he is a figure of contradictions. 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, Gilgamesh possesses strength and beauty beyond mortal measure, yet he is also driven by an insatiable hunger for glory and an almost tyrannical need to prove his superiority over all who surround him. Picture him in the early morning light, striding through the streets of Uruk, the world's first great city. The common people bow before him, not only out of respect, but also out of fear, for Gilgamesh in his youth was a king who took what he wanted when he wanted it. He challenged the strongest men to contests he could not lose, claimed the right to any bride on her wedding night, and seemed to view his subjects as existing solely for his own glorification. The people of Uruk, worn down by their king's excesses, lifted their voices in prayer to the gods. They did not pray for Gilgamesh's destruction, for despite his flaws, he was still their king, still the guardian of their city. Instead, they prayed for balance, for someone who could match Gilgamesh's strength and perhaps teach him the meaning of equals, of friendship, of humility. The gods, ever attentive to the prayers of mortals, heard their plea. In response, they commanded Aruru, the goddess of creation, to fashion a being who could serve as both companion and challenger to the great king. From clay and divine breath, she created Enkidu, a wild man who lived among the beasts of the forest. Understanding their language, sharing their simple existence, knowing nothing of civilization's complex ways, Enkidu, half man and half beast, was sent by the gods to kill Gilgamesh, or at least to humble him. Yet the gods' plans often unfold in ways that surprise even their creators. When Gilgamesh first heard reports of this strange wild man, he did not respond with fear or anger, but with curiosity. He sent a temple priestess to find Enkidu, not to destroy him, but to bring him into the world of human society. The priestess found Enkidu at a watering hole, living peacefully among the gazelles and wild horses. Through her gentle presence and patient teaching, she began to awaken in him an understanding of human ways. She shared with him the gifts of civilization, bread and beer, clothing and shelter, the complex emotions and relationships that separate humans from the animals of the field. When Enkidu finally entered Uruk, he was no longer the wild creature of the forest, but he had not lost his essential strength and nobility. The moment he and Gilgamesh met, it was as if two great forces of nature had encountered each other. They wrestled in the streets of the city, their strength so evenly matched that buildings shook and the ground cracked beneath their feet. Enkidu and Gilgamesh ended their battle in a truce, and recognized each other's great strength and prowess. But more than strength, they recognized something deeper in each other: the loneliness of exceptional beings, the burden of power, and the joy of finally finding someone who could truly understand the weight of their existence. Their friendship blossomed with the intensity of two souls who had been seeking each other across the vast expanse of creation. However, Gilgamesh befriended him, and they became as brothers. Enkidu's wild wisdom tempered Gilgamesh's civilized ambition, while Gilgamesh's vision of glory inspired Enkidu to reach beyond the simple contentment of his forest life. Together, they dreamed of deeds that would echo through eternity. Gilgamesh, always seeking more renown and power, suggested that the two travel to the cedar forest. This was no ordinary forest, but the sacred cedar forest, a place set apart by the gods themselves, where mortals were forbidden to tread. Enkidu tells Gilgamesh about the fearsome monster Humbaba, whom Enlil, the god of earth, wind, and air, had appointed guardian of the distant cedar forest, a place forbidden to mortals. Enlil has appointed Humbaba to guard it, and armed him 3 sevenfold terrors. Terrible to all flesh is Humbaba. When he roars, it is like the torrent of the storm. His breath is like fire, and his jaws are death itself. The very mention of this demon guardian should have filled any rational person with dread. Yet Gilgamesh saw in this terror an opportunity for the kind of glory that would make his name immortal. Enkidu, with his deep connection to the natural world, understood the danger more clearly than his friend. He had grown up in the wild places and knew the power of the forces that the gods had set to guard their sacred groves. Yet he also understood that their friendship meant walking into danger together, supporting each other through trials that neither could face alone. The people of Uruk gathered to bid farewell to their king and his companion as they prepared for their journey. The city's elders blessed them with prayers and offerings, while mothers held their children close, knowing that heroes often do not return from the paths they choose to walk. Yet there was also pride in their farewells, for these 2 men carried with them the hopes and dreams of their entire civilization. The journey to the cedar forest was long and arduous, taking them through landscapes that grew increasingly wild and remote. Enkidu urges Gilgamesh on whenever his courage flags, assuring him that they can defeat Humbaba. When Enkidu falters, Gilgamesh reassures him that he is a good warrior, that when the time for battle comes, he will not lose heart, and that they will stand and fight together. Night after night, as they made their camp under the stars, the 2 friends shared their dreams and fears. Gilgamesh spoke of his desire to achieve something that would outlast his mortal life, while Enkidu shared his deep understanding of the natural world and the wisdom he had gained from living close to the rhythms of the earth. When they finally reached the cedar forest, they found themselves in a place of otherworldly beauty. The great trees stretched up toward the heavens, like pillars supporting the sky itself, their branches whispering secrets in languages older than human speech. The air was thick with the scent of cedar and the presence of the divine, a reminder that they had entered a realm where the usual rules of human existence no longer applied, that it is guarded by the demigod, Humbaba, and was once entered by the hero. Gilgamesh, who dared cut down trees from its virgin, stands during his quest for fame. The confrontation with Humbaba was not merely a physical battle, but a spiritual trial that would test the very essence of their friendship and their understanding of their place in the cosmic order. The demon guardian appeared before them like a force of nature itself, his voice the sound of storms, his presence a reminder of the terrible power that the gods could unleash upon those who defied their will. Yet Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood together, their friendship giving them a strength that neither could have possessed alone. The battle was fierce and terrible, shaking the very foundations of the forest. Trees that had stood for millennia swayed and groaned as the 2 heroes fought against the supernatural guardian. But it was not mere physical strength that won the day. It was the power of their bond, the way they fought not as two separate warriors, but as one unified force, each anticipating the other's moves, each ready to sacrifice himself for his friend. When Humbaba finally fell, the forest itself seemed to mourn. The ancient trees whispered their lament, and the very air grew heavy with the weight of what had been accomplished. Gilgamesh and Enkidu had achieved their goal, but the victory came with a price that they were only beginning to understand. Cut down the sacred cedars, fashioning from them a great gate that they would carry back to Uruk as a trophy of their achievement. Yet even as they celebrated their triumph, both men felt a strange unease, as if they had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, as if their victory had somehow set in motion forces beyond their control. The journey back to Uruk was marked by a different kind of tension. They had achieved the glory they sought, but Enkidu in particular seemed troubled by dreams and omens. The wild man who had once lived in harmony with the natural world now found himself haunted by visions of divine displeasure, as if the gods themselves were reconsidering their tolerance for mortal presumption. When they finally returned to Uruk, the city welcomed them as heroes. The great cedar gate was installed with ceremony and celebration, and songs were composed in honor of their achievement. Yet even in the midst of triumph, sensitive souls could sense that something fundamental had changed, that the two friends had set in motion consequences that would ripple through their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. The story of their adventure in the cedar forest became the first chapter in a larger tale of friendship, loss, and the search for meaning in a world where even the mightiest heroes must eventually face the ultimate limitation of mortality. It spoke to the human desire to achieve something lasting, to leave a mark upon the world that would survive beyond our brief existence. But perhaps most importantly, it celebrated the transformative power of true friendship. Gilgamesh began his story as a tyrant, but through his bond with Enkidu, he began to learn what it meant to care for another person as much as he cared for himself. Enkidu, who had lived a simple life among the beasts, discovered through his friendship with Gilgamesh the complex joys and sorrows of human civilization. Their story reminds us that the greatest adventures are not those we undertake alone, but those we share with people who understand our dreams and are willing to stand beside us as we pursue them. In a world where individual achievement is often celebrated above all else, the Epic of Gilgamesh offers a different vision, that our greatest strength comes not from our individual power, but from our connections to others. It is a story of love and comradeship, arrogance and uncertainty, wisdom and folly, impetuosity and determination, immortality and the inevitability of death. As we continue our journey through this ancient tale, we carry with us the memory of two friends who dared to challenge the gods themselves, not for personal gain, but for the joy of facing the impossible together. In the quiet of this ancient night, as the stars wheel overhead and the rivers flow toward the sea, we can still hear the echo of their laughter, still feel the warmth of their friendship, still draw inspiration from their belief that even mortal lives can achieve something eternal when they are lived with courage, love, and the unshakable bond of true companionship. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks to us across the millennia because it understands something essential about the human condition, that we are all seeking something that will outlast our brief time on earth, and that the most likely path to that kind of immortality lies not in individual achievement, but in the love we share and the lives we touch along the way. Let us pause here in this moment between day and night to witness how the world's first urban society organized itself. For the Sumerians did not merely build cities. They created something far more remarkable, a social structure that allowed thousands of people to live together in harmony, each contributing their skills and talents to the greater good of the community. Picture, if you will, a farmer returning from the fields at sunset, his weathered hands still bearing the rich soil of Mesopotamia. This man, along with his fellow agriculturalists, formed the foundation upon which all Sumerian civilization rested. The farmers had to produce enough not only for their families, but also enough to sell in the markets for the city laborers, merchants, artisans, priests, and rulers. Without their patient labor, their understanding of the seasonal rhythms, their careful tending of the irrigation channels, none of the great achievements of Sumer would have been possible. Sumerians harvested during the spring in 3-person teams consisting of a reaper, a binder, and a sheaf handler. The farmers would use threshing wagons, driven by oxen, to separate the cereal heads from the stalks, and then use threshing sleds to disengage the grain. This was work that required not only physical strength, but also deep knowledge passed down through generations. When to plant, when to harvest, how to manage the complex network of canals that brought life to the desert. These farmers were more than simple laborers. They were the keepers of humanity's first agricultural wisdom. They understood that the timing of the floods, the phases of the moon, and the behavior of the seasons were all part of a larger pattern that connected their daily work to the cosmic order itself. In their careful observation of natural cycles, they laid the groundwork for the world's first calendar, the first attempts at weather prediction, and the earliest understanding of sustainable agriculture. As our imaginary farmer makes his way through the city gates, we encounter the bustling marketplace where another vital segment of Sumerian society plies their trade. This social class consisted of the people who would have made Sumer's marketplaces buzz, such as merchants selling trade goods like fruits, vegetables, animals, and perfumes, as well as rarer imported materials like timber and metals, artisans, and craftsmen displaying their handiwork. The merchants were the connective tissue of the ancient world, traveling dangerous routes across deserts and mountains to bring exotic goods to Sumerian cities. They carried not only physical goods, but also ideas, technologies, and cultural practices from distant lands. A merchant might set out from Uruk with a cargo of fine textiles and return months later with precious stones from the mountains, cedar wood from distant forests, and stories of strange customs from far-off peoples. These commercial exchanges were not merely economic transactions, but cultural meetings that enriched Sumerian civilization immeasurably. Through trade, the Sumerians learned of new agricultural techniques, architectural innovations, and artistic styles. They adopted and adapted these foreign influences, weaving them into their own unique cultural fabric. The artisans who worked alongside the merchants were the skilled craftsmen, whose talents transformed raw materials into objects of beauty and utility. Potters shaped clay into vessels both practical and beautiful. Metalworkers forged tools and weapons that were marvels of early engineering. And textile workers created fabrics so fine they were treasured across the ancient world. Each craft guild maintained its own traditions and secrets, passed down from master to apprentice in an unbroken chain of knowledge. A young potter would spend years learning not just the techniques of shaping clay, but also the prayers and rituals that ensured the kiln fires burned properly and the finished vessels emerged without cracks. This integration of practical skill with spiritual practice was characteristic of Sumerian society, where work was seen as a form of collaboration with the divine. In the evening light, we might observe these artisans finishing their daily labors, carefully cleaning their tools, and offering small prayers of thanksgiving for another day's successful work. Their dedication to excellence was not merely professional pride, but a recognition that their skills were gifts from the gods, to be used in service of the community's well-being. There were 4 main classes of people in ancient Sumer: the priests, the upper class, the lower class, and the slaves. The priests. The Sumerians believed that all forces of nature were alive. Priests were very powerful and important. They told people how to behave to keep the gods happy. Priests in Sumer were also the local doctors. If you got sick, you sent for a priest. The priests shaved their heads so that everyone knew they were priests. As we continue our gentle walk through the city, we come upon the temple complex, where the priests are conducting their evening rituals. These men, easily recognizable by their shaved heads and white linen robes, occupied a unique position in Sumerian society. They were intermediaries between the human and divine worlds, responsible for maintaining the delicate balance that kept the gods' favor upon the city. The priests' duties extended far beyond religious ceremonies. They were the keepers of written knowledge, the maintainers of the calendar, the administrators of the temple's vast agricultural estates. Many were skilled physicians who combined herbal medicine with spiritual healing, understanding that human health depended upon harmony between body, mind, and spirit. The temple served as much more than a place of worship. It was a center of learning where scribes were trained in the intricate art of cuneiform writing, where mathematical and astronomical calculations were performed, where the complex business of urban administration was conducted. The priests who oversaw these activities were among the most educated people in the ancient world, possessing knowledge that spanned everything from agriculture to architecture, from medicine to meteorology. In the dim light of oil lamps, we can imagine these scholar priests bent over their clay tablets, carefully recording the day's transactions, copying ancient texts or composing new hymns to the gods. Their work was painstaking and demanding, requiring not only intellectual ability, but also deep spiritual commitment. They understood that their role was essential to the functioning of society, that their careful maintenance of divine relationships was what allowed the city to prosper. The upper classes of Sumerian society included wealthy merchants, successful artisans, large landowners, and government officials. These individuals had accumulated enough wealth and influence to live in comfortable homes, often 2 or 3 stories tall, with multiple rooms and private courtyards. They could afford to dress in fine fabrics, eat meat regularly, and employ servants to manage their households. Yet even the wealthy understood that their good fortune came with responsibilities. They were expected to contribute generously to temple maintenance, to support public works projects, and to provide employment for the less fortunate. The concept of social obligation was deeply embedded in Sumerian culture, reflecting their understanding that individual prosperity was meaningless without community well-being. The lower classes consisted of skilled workers, small farmers, and others who labored with their hands, but owned little property. Though they might live in smaller homes and wear simpler clothes, they were not without dignity or legal protection. Sumerian law recognized their rights and provided mechanisms for resolving disputes fairly. Even slaves, though they occupied the lowest rung of the social ladder, were afforded certain protections under Sumerian law. They could own property, conduct business, and in some cases, earn their freedom. This was a society that, while certainly hierarchical, recognized the fundamental humanity of all its members. The legal framework that governed these social relationships was codified in what we now know as the Code of Ur-Nammu. The Code of Ur-Nammu, c. 2100 to 2050 BCE, is the oldest extant law code in the world. It was written by the Sumerian king Ur-Nammu, or his son Shulgi, of Ur centuries before the famous Code of Hammurabi. This remarkable document represents humanity's first systematic attempt to create a just society governed by written law rather than arbitrary power. It contains strong statements of royal power like, "I eliminated enmity, violence, and cries for justice." Yet the code was not merely about royal authority. It was a comprehensive system designed to protect the rights of all citizens and ensure that justice was administered fairly and consistently. His code notably emphasized the protection of the poor, incorporating provisions for debt cancellation and measures against corrupt officials. This approach suggested a societal commitment towards justice and equity, challenging the prevailing lex talionis principle of retaliation. This was revolutionary thinking for its time, establishing the principle that law should serve not just the powerful, but all members of society. The daily rhythms of Sumerian life were marked by a deep integration of work, worship, and community participation. People rose before dawn to begin their labors, pausing at midday for rest and a simple meal, then continuing their work until sunset. Evenings were times for family gathering, storytelling, and quiet reflection. The work week was punctuated by religious festivals and market days, when the normal routine was suspended in favor of celebration and commerce. These occasions brought together people from all social classes, creating opportunities for social interaction that transcended the usual boundaries of hierarchy. Children learned their future roles through observation and participation, gradually taking on more responsibility as they grew older. Education, for those who could afford it, took place in temple schools where boys learned to read and write cuneiform, to perform mathematical calculations, and to understand the basics of law and administration. Women in Sumerian society enjoyed more rights and freedoms than would be common in later civilizations. They could own property, conduct business, and serve as priestesses in the temples. Some became skilled artisans, running their own workshops and training apprentices. Others managed large households or served as midwives and healers in their communities. The elderly were revered for their wisdom and experience, consulted on important decisions, and cared for by their families. Death was viewed not as an ending, but as a transition, with elaborate burial rituals ensuring that the deceased would be properly welcomed in the afterlife. This social structure, with all its complexity and nuance, was held together by shared values and common purposes. The Sumerians understood that their civilization was a collective achievement, requiring the contributions of everyone from the humblest farmer to the most learned priest. Each person had a role to play, and each role was essential to the functioning of the whole. As we conclude our evening walk through ancient Uruk, we can appreciate how the Sumerians created something unprecedented in human history. A society that was both highly organized and remarkably fair, both efficient and humane. Their legacy lies not just in their technological innovations or artistic achievements, but in their demonstration that large numbers of people can live together, peacefully and productively, when they share common values and respect each other's dignity. In the quiet of this ancient night, as the city settles into sleep, we can still sense the presence of those long-ago citizens who built the foundation upon which all subsequent civilization would rest. Their voices whisper to us across the millennia, reminding us that the challenges of creating a just and prosperous society are eternal. But so too is the human capacity to meet those challenges with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering commitment to the common good. The gentle morning light spreads across the ancient city of Uruk, casting long shadows between the towering ziggurats and bustling workshops. In the distance, you can hear the rhythmic sound of hammers on copper, the soft whisper of grain being poured into clay vessels, and something new, the rumbling of wooden wheels turning slowly against the earth. Close your eyes and imagine walking through these ancient streets, where human ingenuity first began to reshape the world. The Sumerians. These remarkable people who gave us writing and cities were also the great inventors of antiquity. Their curious minds and practical needs led them to create tools and systems that would echo through time itself, reaching us here, thousands of years later. Let us begin with perhaps their most revolutionary invention, the wheel. Picture, if you will, a Sumerian potter working in his modest workshop around 3500 BCE. His hands move gracefully around a circular clay platform, spinning it slowly as he shapes a vessel. This simple rotating disc, the potter's wheel, would become the foundation for one of humanity's greatest innovations. The potter pauses in his work, wiping clay-stained hands on his apron. He watches the wheel spin, mesmerized by its perfect circular motion. Perhaps it was in such a moment of quiet contemplation that the first spark of inspiration struck. What if this spinning motion could be used not just for shaping clay, but for moving heavy objects? The transformation from potter's wheel to transportation wheel was gradual, like the slow turn of seasons. Sumerian craftsmen began experimenting with solid wooden discs carefully carved from tree trunks. These early wheels were heavy and cumbersome, but they represented a revolutionary shift in how humans could interact with their physical world. Imagine the first time a Sumerian farmer loaded his grain onto a wheeled cart. The relief in his tired shoulders as he discovered he could move 10 times the weight with half the effort. Word of this innovation spread through the city like ripples on the Euphrates River. Soon, wheels were rumbling through the streets of Uruk, carrying everything from barley to building stones. But the wheel was just the beginning. The Sumerians possessed minds that saw patterns in nature and found ways to measure and predict the world around them. They turned their attention to the greatest timekeeper of all, the moon dot. As evening settles over our ancient city, look up at the crescent moon hanging like a silver smile in the darkening sky. The Sumerians watched this celestial dance with deep reverence and practical purpose. They noticed how the moon waxed and waned in predictable cycles, how it took approximately 29.5 days to complete its journey from new moon to full moon and back again. This observation became the foundation of their lunar calendar, one of humanity's first systematic attempts to organize time itself. The Sumerian calendar divided the year into 12 lunar months, each beginning when the first sliver of the new moon appeared low on the western horizon at sunset. The ancient Sumerian calendar, roughly dated to 2100 BC, divided a year into 12 lunar months of 29 or 30 days. Picture the Sumerian astronomer priests standing atop their ziggurats, scanning the twilight sky for that first glimpse of the new moon. When they spotted it, runners would carry the news throughout the city, and a new month would officially begin. This was more than mere timekeeping. It was a sacred ritual that connected human society to the cosmic order. The Sumerians understood that their lunar year of 354 days didn't quite match the agricultural year of 365 days. With characteristic ingenuity, they solved this problem by adding an extra month every few years, keeping their calendar aligned with the seasons. This practice of intercalation, inserting additional time periods to maintain accuracy, shows the sophisticated mathematical thinking that characterized Sumerian civilization. But perhaps their most enduring intellectual gift to humanity was their revolutionary number system. While we think naturally in groups of 10, counting on our fingers, the Sumerians developed something far more elegant and useful, a base 60 system, also known as sexagesimal. Sexagesimal, also known as base 60, is a numeral system with 60 as its base. It originated with the ancient Sumerians in the 3rd millennium BC, was passed down to the ancient Babylonians, and is still used in a modified form for measuring time, angles, and geographic coordinates. Why 60? The answer lies in the remarkable mathematical properties of this number. 60 can be divided evenly by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and 60 itself. This abundance of factors made calculations infinitely easier for ancient mathematicians and merchants. Imagine a Sumerian merchant in the marketplace, his clay tablet covered with cuneiform calculations. He's dividing his grain harvest among different buyers, and the base 60 system allows him to create precise fractions without the messy remainders that would plague a base 10 system. His calculations flow smoothly, like water finding its level. In a canal, the Sumerians used this system to divide their day into periods that still echo in our modern world. 5,000 years ago, Sumerians in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley in today's Iraq had a calendar that divided the year into 30-day months. divided the day into 12 periods, each corresponding to 2 of our hours, and divided these periods into 30 parts, each like 4 of our minutes. Feel the weight of this legacy as you glance at your clock. Those 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. This is the gift of ancient Sumerian mathematics, reaching across 5 millennia to structure our daily lives. When you measure an angle in degrees, with each degree containing 60 minutes and each minute containing 60 seconds, you're using the same system that Sumerian astronomers used to chart the movements of stars and planets. The Sumerians also developed sophisticated measurement systems for length, weight, and volume. Their standard unit of length was the cubit, based on the distance from a man's elbow to his fingertip. From this human-scaled measurement, they created a whole system of precise standards that allowed for consistent trade and construction throughout their civilization. Picture the builders of the great Ziggurat of Ur, working with standardized bricks and precise measurements. Each brick was crafted to exact specifications, each level carefully calculated to achieve the perfect proportions that would allow the structure to rise safely toward the heavens. This wasn't mere construction. It was applied mathematics. On a monumental scale, the Sumerians developed early forms of algebra and geometry, solving practical problems like calculating the area of fields or the volume of grain stores. Their mathematical tablets reveal a sophisticated understanding of mathematical relationships that wouldn't be fully appreciated by other cultures for centuries. As we near the end of our journey through Sumerian innovation, imagine standing in a bustling Sumerian workshop where all these technologies come together. The potter's wheel spins steadily, shaping vessels that will be used to measure grain according to standardized units. Nearby, a scribe updates his lunar calendar, noting the approach of the new moon that will mark the beginning of another month. In the distance, the rumble of wooden wheels carries the products of human ingenuity throughout the city. The base 60 system allows merchants to calculate prices and quantities with unprecedented precision. These innovations aren't separate inventions. They're interconnected threads in the tapestry of human progress. The Sumerians gave us more than tools and systems. They gave us a new way of thinking about the world as something that could be measured, predicted, and improved through human ingenuity. They showed us that observation, experimentation, and practical application could transform the conditions of human life. As the moon rises over ancient Mesopotamia, casting its silver light on the innovations that would shape human civilization, we can almost hear the whispers of these ancient inventors. Their wheels still turn in our modern world. Their numbers still count our moments. Their calendar still marks our seasons. The gentle night wind carries the scent of the Euphrates and the distant sound of bronze tools being carefully set aside after another day of human progress. In their workshops and schools, the Sumerians planted the seeds of scientific thinking that would eventually bloom into the modern world. Tomorrow, as you check the time or watch a wheel turn, remember these ancient innovators who first asked the questions that would change everything. How can we measure time? How can we move heavy objects? How can we calculate with precision? Their answers became the foundation stones of human civilization, still supporting us today as we continue their eternal quest to understand and improve our world. The innovations of Sumer continue to whisper their secrets across the centuries, reminding us that human creativity and ingenuity are perhaps our greatest inventions of all. The sun hangs lower in the sky now over ancient Mesopotamia, casting longer shadows across the once fertile fields that stretch toward the horizon. The great Ziggurats of Sumer still rise majestically from the landscape, but something has changed in the air. There's a heaviness, a sense that the golden age of this first civilization is slowly drawing to a close. Listen closely, and you can hear the whispers of change carried on the desert wind. The same rivers that gave birth to civilization are now speaking a different language, one of salt and shifting channels. The same ambition that built cities is now turning neighbor against neighbor, kingdom against kingdom. Let us walk together through these twilight years of Sumerian independence, when the very success of this remarkable civilization began to carry within it the seeds of its own transformation. The decline of Sumer was not a sudden catastrophe, but rather a gradual erosion, like the slow weathering of ancient stone. It began in the very fields that had made their prosperity possible. For centuries, the Sumerians had performed what seemed like a miracle, transforming the harsh landscape of southern Mesopotamia into a garden of abundance through their sophisticated irrigation systems. Picture the vast network of canals that crisscrossed the land like the veins of a great body, carrying life-giving water from the Tigris and Euphrates to fields of wheat and barley. These waterways represented generations of backbreaking labor, careful planning, and communal cooperation. They were the technological marvel that made Sumerian civilization possible. But water, as the Sumerians discovered, can be both a blessing and a curse. Over time, the Sumerians' irrigation practices led to the salinization of the soil. Water used for irrigation contained dissolved salts, which, when evaporated, were left behind in the soil, gradually building up to toxic levels. In the scorching heat of the Mesopotamian sun, the irrigation water would evaporate, leaving behind microscopic crystals of salt that slowly accumulated in the earth. At first, this process was invisible, silent, almost imperceptible. The wheat still grew, the barley still ripened, the granaries still filled each harvest season. But gradually, yields began to decline. The soil that had once been black and rich began to show white patches, like early frost that never melted away. Imagine a Sumerian farmer kneeling in his field, running the increasingly salty soil through his weathered fingers. His grandfather had worked this same land as had his great-grandfather before him. The field had always been generous, feeding his family and providing surplus for trade. But now, season after season, the harvest grew smaller. The wheat struggled to grow in the increasingly saline earth. During the Akkadian and Ur III phases, there was a shift from the cultivation of wheat to the more salt-tolerant barley, but this was insufficient. And during the period from 2100 BC to 1700 BC, it is estimated that the population in this area declined by nearly 3/5. The Sumerians, with their characteristic ingenuity, attempted to adapt. They began growing barley instead of wheat, as this hardy grain could tolerate higher levels of salt in the soil. But even this adaptation could not stem the tide of environmental decline. The only solution to this salt problem, called salinization, was for the Sumerians to leave the land unwatered and fallow for several seasons to allow the water table to fall. The scarce rains would then slowly draw the salt down below the soil cultivation zone. This solution, however, required a luxury that the Sumerians could not afford: time. In a world where cities depended on continuous agricultural surplus, where populations had grown to depend on intensive farming, leaving fields fallow was not just economically difficult, it was potentially catastrophic. The environmental crisis created a cascade of problems that rippled through Sumerian society. As crop yields declined, food became scarcer and more expensive. Trade networks that had once brought prosperity now carried the burden of feeding hungry populations. The surplus that had supported priests, scribes, artisans, and administrators began to shrink. Cities that had once competed in building ever grander, temples and palaces now found themselves struggling to maintain their basic infrastructure. The social contract that had held Sumerian civilization together, the understanding that the gods would provide abundance in exchange for proper worship and social order, began to fray as abundance became scarcity. But environmental decline was not the only force reshaping the Sumerian world. From the north came new peoples, new languages, new ambitions. The Akkadians, a Semitic-speaking people who had long lived alongside the Sumerians, began to consolidate their power and expand their territories. The story of Sumer's political decline is inextricably linked to the rise of one of history's first great conquerors, Sargon of Akkad. His reign would correspond to c. 2334 to 2279 BC in the Middle Chronology, and he was one of the earliest of the world's great empire builders, conquering all of southern Mesopotamia, as well as parts of Syria, Anatolia, and Elam. Picture this remarkable figure, rising from humble origins to reshape the ancient world. Legend tells us that Sargon was found as a baby floating in a basket on the Euphrates River, rescued and raised by a palace gardener. Whether this tale is historical fact or mythological embellishment, it speaks to the powerful narrative that Sargon crafted about himself, a man of the people, chosen by destiny to unite the fractured world of Mesopotamia. It is thought that Sargon of Akkad was able to conquer Sumer as much through propaganda as through military strength. His autobiography, The Legend of Sargon of Akkad, presented him as a man of the people opposed to the wealthy nobility of the city-states. This was a masterful stroke of political genius. Rather than presenting himself as merely another conqueror, Sargon positioned himself as a reformer, someone who would bring unity and justice to a land torn apart by competing city-states. The Sumerian city-states, weakened by environmental crisis and internal conflicts, proved unable to unite against this new threat. One by one, they fell to Sargon's expanding empire. In 2340 BC, Sargon of Akkad conquered most of the Sumerian city-states, thus ending Sumer with the rise of the Akkadian Empire, sometimes regarded as the first empire in history. The conquest was not simply a military victory, but a cultural transformation. By defeating the Sumerians, he established the first Semitic dynasty in the region. For the first time in history, the Mesopotamian world would be ruled not by Sumerian priest-kings, but by Semitic emperors who spoke Akkadian as their native language. Yet this was not the end of Sumerian influence. The Akkadian Empire united Akkadian and Sumerian speakers under one rule and exercised significant influence across Mesopotamia, the Levant, and Anatolia. The Akkadians, practical rulers that they were, recognized the value of Sumerian knowledge and culture. They adopted the cuneiform writing system, incorporated Sumerian religious practices, and maintained many of the administrative structures that had made Sumerian civilization so successful. In many ways, the Akkadian conquest represented both an ending and a beginning. It marked the end of independent Sumerian city-states, but it also ensured that Sumerian knowledge, culture, and innovations would spread far beyond the borders of their original homeland. The empire that Sargon built would carry Sumerian influence from the mountains of Anatolia to the shores of the Arabian Peninsula. The decline of Sumer was also hastened by external pressures from other directions. The Elamites, based in what is now western Iran, represented another growing power that challenged Sumerian independence. These mountain peoples brought different military technologies and tactics that the traditional Sumerian city-states struggled to counter. As the years passed, the political landscape of Mesopotamia became increasingly complex and unstable. The Akkadian Empire collapsed sometime after 2200 BC. Around 2100 BC, as Akkad declined, the city of Ur took its place, rising to prominence. A century after its fall, and the city-states once again became independent. This pattern of rise and fall, conquest and independence would characterize the region for centuries to come. But even as political control shifted from Sumerians to Akkadians to others, the environmental challenges remained. The salinization of the soil continued its relentless advance, and the population decline that had begun during the height of Sumerian power continued unabated. During the period from 2100 BC to 1700 BC, It is estimated that the population in this area declined by nearly 3/5. This demographic collapse represents one of history's earliest examples of environmental limits constraining human civilization. The Sumerians had pushed the carrying capacity of their environment to its limits and beyond. The very success of their agricultural system had created the conditions for its own long-term failure. As we stand now in the gathering dusk of Sumerian independence, watching the sun set over fields that grow ever more barren, we can see the complex interplay of factors that brought about this transformation. Environmental degradation, political fragmentation, external conquest, and demographic decline all worked together to end the age of independent Sumerian city-states. Yet in witnessing this decline, we also see the remarkable resilience of human knowledge and culture. The Sumerians may have lost their political independence, but their intellectual and cultural legacy would prove virtually indestructible. Their writing system, their mathematical innovations, their legal concepts, their architectural techniques, and their literary traditions would all survive the fall of their political institutions. The night wind carries the scent of salt from Fen Sol, the increasingly barren fields, but it also carries something else, the whispers of teachers and students, of scribes carefully copying ancient texts, of craftsmen passing down their skills to the next generation. The political entity we call Sumer may have been ending, but the Sumerian contribution to human civilization was just beginning its journey through history. As the stars emerge in the darkening sky above ancient Mesopotamia, we can almost hear the voices of those who lived through this great transformation, understanding that they were witnessing not just the end of an era, but the metamorphosis of human civilization itself. The rivers may have changed their course, but the current of human knowledge and innovation that the Sumerians had set in motion would continue to flow, carrying their legacy far beyond the boundaries of time and place. As the first light of dawn breaks over the ancient ruins of Mesopotamia, painting the weathered stones of ziggurats in shades of gold and amber, we find ourselves standing at the end of our journey through Sumerian civilization. But in truth, this is not an ending at all. It is a recognition, a moment of understanding that the whispers of ancient Sumer have never truly fallen silent. Look around you in this modern world, and you will see the fingerprints of Sumerian innovation everywhere. In the clock that measures your hours, in the laws that govern your society, in the stories that shape your imagination, in the very act of reading these words. All of these trace their origins back to those industrious people who first settled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers more than 5,000 years ago. The morning air carries with it the timeless truth that civilization is not a destination, but a river that flows continuously through time, carrying the innovations of one age to the next. The Sumerians did not simply create objects and ideas. They created the very concept of human progress itself. Let us begin with perhaps the most fundamental gift to humanity, the written word. When you send a text message, write an email, or sign your name to a document, you are participating in a tradition that began with Sumerian scribes pressing wedge-shaped styluses into soft clay tablets. The Sumerians established one of the world's first urban societies and were pioneers in developing agriculture, creating city-states, and most notably, inventing writing. Every alphabet, every written language, every book that has ever been written can trace its lineage back to those first pictographs that evolved into cuneiform script. The transformation from pictures to symbols, from concrete representations to abstract concepts, marked the moment when human thought itself became portable, preservable, and shareable across vast distances of time and space. Consider the profound revolution this represented. Before writing, human knowledge lived only in memory, passed down through oral tradition from generation to generation. Each death potentially meant the loss of accumulated wisdom. But with writing, the Sumerians created a kind of external memory. For the human species, a way to store not just facts and figures, but stories, laws, prayers, and dreams in a form that could survive the death of their creators. The Epic of Gilgamesh, that ancient tale of friendship and mortality that we explored earlier, continues to resonate with readers today precisely because the Sumerians invented a way to preserve such stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a well-known Mesopotamian myth, often regarded as the oldest surviving work of literature. In every novel you read, every movie you watch, every story that explores themes of heroism, friendship, and the search for meaning, you are experiencing echoes of this first great literary work. But the Sumerians gave us more than just the technology of writing. They gave us entire genres of literature. The flood myth, the hero's journey, the tragic friendship, the quest for immortality, these narrative patterns that still dominate our storytelling today, were first explored in Sumerian literature. Eridu Genesis, also called the Sumerian creation myth or Sumerian flood myth, offers a description of the story surrounding how humanity was created by the gods, the circumstances leading to the origins of the first cities in Mesopotamia, how the office of kingship entered this probably Neolithical civilization, and the global flood. The mathematical legacy of Sumer is equally profound and perhaps even more pervasive in our daily lives. They also developed a system of mathematics that used base 60, which is still used in modern times for measuring time and angles. Every time you glance at a clock, you are using Sumerian mathematics. The 60 seconds in a minute, the 60 minutes in an hour, the 360 degrees in a circle, all of these derive from the base 60 system that Sumerian mathematicians developed over 4 millennia ago. This sexagesimal system was not an arbitrary choice, but reflected the Sumerians' sophisticated understanding of mathematical relationships. They recognized that 60 had more divisors than any other number under 100, making it ideal for practical calculations involving fractions and proportions. Their choice has proven so practical that it has survived every subsequent mathematical revolution, from the decimal system to digital computing. The Sumerians also pioneered the concept of urban planning, creating the first cities with organized layouts, systems of streets, and designated areas for different activities. Their innovations in writing, law, urban planning, and governance laid the foundations for future societies. Every time you navigate through a city with its planned streets, designated districts, and organized infrastructure, you are experiencing the legacy of Sumerian urban planners. These ancient architects understood that cities required more than just buildings. They needed systems. Water had to be brought in and waste carried away. Markets needed to be accessible, but separate from residential areas. Religious and administrative buildings needed to be prominent, but not overwhelming. The solutions they developed to these challenges became the template for urban civilization. Perhaps most importantly, the Sumerians invented the concept of law as a written, systematic code that applied equally to all citizens. The Code of Anamu is the oldest known law code surviving today. It is from Mesopotamia and is written on tablets in the Sumerian language c. 2100 to 2050 BCE. Every modern legal system, from the Constitution of the United States to the international laws that govern relations between nations, traces its conceptual origins back to these first attempts to create written standards of justice. The Sumerian understanding of law was revolutionary, not just because it was written down, but because it was based on the principle that justice should be predictable and consistent, rather than relying on the whims of rulers or the varying interpretations of local customs. The Sumerians created a system where the consequences of actions were clearly defined and publicly known. This legal legacy extends far beyond formal law codes. The concepts of contracts, property rights, fair trade, and even the presumption of innocence all have their roots in Sumerian legal thinking. Every time you sign a contract, every time you expect to be treated fairly by institutions. Every time you appeal to principles of justice, you are invoking concepts that the Sumerians first articulated in their cuneiform codes. The Sumerians also gave us the foundation of organized religion, as we know it today. Their elaborate pantheon of gods, their complex rituals, their magnificent temples, and their systematic theology provided the template for virtually every subsequent religious system. The concept of organized priesthood, of religious hierarchy, of sacred texts, and of elaborate ceremonial worship all trace their origins to Sumerian religious practice. But perhaps their most enduring religious legacy lies in their mythology. The stories they told about gods and heroes, about creation and destruction, about the relationship between divine and mortal realms, continue to resonate in religious and cultural traditions around the world. The Garden of Eden, the Great Flood, the Tower of Babel, these familiar stories all have their roots in Sumerian mythology. The Sumerians were also among the first to develop specialized crafts and professions. The concept of the skilled artisan, the professional scribe, the career priest, the full-time administrator, all of these social roles were Sumerian innovations. They understood that complex societies required specialization, and they created the social structures that made such specialization possible. This legacy of specialization has shaped virtually every aspect of modern life. The doctor who treats your illness, the teacher who educates your children, the engineer who designs your buildings, the artist who creates your entertainment hall. Of these are fulfilling roles that the Sumerians first conceived and organized into coherent social systems. The Sumerians also pioneered the concept of formal education. They created the first schools, developed the first systematic curricula, and established the first professional teaching methods. The idea that knowledge should be deliberately transmitted from teacher to student, that learning should be organized and sequential, that education should be available to those who showed aptitude, regardless of their birth. All of these educational principles were first implemented in Sumerian schools. In the field of technology, Sumerian innovations continue to influence our world. The wheel, as we have seen, remains fundamental to transportation and industry. Their development of bronze working, their innovations in agriculture, their advances in architecture and engineering, all of these provided the technological foundation upon which subsequent civilizations built. But perhaps the most profound Sumerian legacy lies not in any specific innovation, but in their way of thinking about the world itself. The Sumerians were the first people to approach problems systematically, to seek practical solutions to complex challenges, and to believe that human ingenuity could improve the conditions of life. They were the first to see the world as something that could be studied, understood, and improved through human effort. This scientific and technological mindset, the belief that observation, experimentation, and systematic thinking could lead to practical improvements, is so fundamental to modern civilization that we often take it for granted. But it was not inevitable. It was a revolutionary way of thinking that the Sumerians developed and that subsequent civilizations inherited and refined. As we stand now in the growing light of this new day, surrounded by the countless ways that Sumerian innovations continue to shape our world, we can begin to understand the true magnitude of their achievement. They were not just the first civilization, they were the people who invented the very concept of civilization itself. They showed us that human beings could live together in large numbers, that they could organize complex societies, that they could create systems of law and governance, that they could develop technologies to improve their lives, and that they could preserve their knowledge for future generations. They proved that humanity was capable of progress, of growth, of continuous improvement. Every time you use a computer, you are using a technology that depends on the mathematical concepts the Sumerians developed. Every time you participate in democratic governance, you are participating in systems that trace their origins to Sumerian assemblies. Every time you read a story, you are engaging with narrative forms that the Sumerians first perfected. The legacy of Sumer is not a museum piece, not a historical curiosity, but a living presence in our daily lives. Their innovations have become so fundamental to human civilization that they are nearly invisible, like the air we breathe or the water we drink. We use their gifts so naturally that we often forget they were gifts at all. As the sun rises fully over the ancient landscape of Mesopotamia, illuminating the ruins of great cities and the traces of irrigation canals, we can almost hear the voices of those first urban pioneers speaking across the centuries. They seem to whisper, "We have shown you what is possible. We have given you the tools. Now it is your turn to build." The Sumerians did not just create the first civilization. They created the possibility of all future civilizations. They opened the door to human progress, and that door remains open today. In every innovation, in every advance, in every moment when human creativity triumphs over limitation, we hear the echo of that first great breakthrough that occurred between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers so long ago. Their most profound gift to us may be the understanding that we are not passive victims of circumstance, but active creators of our own destiny. The Sumerians showed us that human beings can shape their environment, can create order from chaos, can build lasting institutions, and can leave the world better than they found it. As we prepare to leave this ancient world and return to our own time, we carry with us the whispers of the Sumerians, not just their specific innovations, but their spirit of inquiry, their determination to solve problems, their belief in the possibility of progress, and their understanding that the greatest human achievements come not from individual genius, but from the collaborative effort of entire societies working together toward common goals. The legacy of Sumer is not in the past, it is in the future, in every human endeavor that seeks to extend the boundaries of what is possible. The whispers of the Sumerians will continue to echo through time, inspiring new generations to push forward the great human project that began so long ago in the fertile valleys of ancient Mesopotamia. As night falls once again over the ancient valley of Mesopotamia, the same gentle darkness that has embraced this land for countless millennia begins to settle over the weathered stones and buried foundations of humanity's first great experiment. In civilization, the moon, that faithful timekeeper the Sumerians knew so well, rises slowly above the horizon, casting its silver light across the landscape where it all began. The evening air is soft and warm, carrying with it the eternal scent of the rivers that still flow through this ancient land. In the distance, the remnants of great ziggurats stand like silent sentinels against the star-filled sky, their stepped profiles barely visible in the moonlight. These monuments, built by hands that turned to dust thousands of years ago, continue their patient vigil over the place where human civilization first learned to speak. Take a moment to breathe deeply and feel the weight of this moment. We have traveled together through 5,000 years of human history, walking in the footsteps of those remarkable people who dared to imagine that life could be different, that human beings could create something greater than the sum of their individual parts. We have witnessed the birth of writing, the first cities, the earliest laws, the invention of the wheel, and the development of mathematics that still governs our daily lives. But more than witnessing these achievements, we have felt the spirit that made them possible. We have sensed the quiet determination of the Sumerian farmer who first channeled the waters of the Euphrates to irrigate his fields. We have shared the wonder of the scribe who first realized that marks on clay could capture the sound of human speech. We have felt the reverence of the priest who climbed the ziggurat steps to commune with the gods, and the satisfaction of the craftsman who shaped the first wheel from solid wood. These were not superhuman figures, these ancient Sumerians. They were people much like ourselves, facing the same fundamental challenges that confront every human society. how to organize communities, how to resolve conflicts, how to ensure justice, how to preserve knowledge, how to create beauty, how to find meaning in the brief span of a human life. What made them extraordinary was not their individual brilliance, but their willingness to work together, to experiment, to learn from failure, and to build upon the achievements of previous generations. As we stand here in the moonlight of Mesopotamia, we can almost hear the voices of those ancient innovators whispering across the centuries. They speak not in the long-dead Sumerian language, but in the universal language of human aspiration. They tell us that the greatest discoveries often come not from sudden inspiration, but from patient observation and persistent effort. They remind us that the most enduring achievements are built not by isolated geniuses, but by entire communities working toward common goals. Listen carefully, and you can hear the gentle splash of oars in the ancient canals, the soft murmur of cuneiform styluses moving across wet clay, the distant sound of bronze tools shaping the world into new forms. These are the sounds of human beings refusing to accept the world as they found it, choosing instead to reshape it according to their vision of what it could become. The Sumerians understood something profound about the nature of progress. It is not a destination, but a journey. Each generation builds upon the foundation laid by those who came before, adding their own innovations, solving their own problems, facing their own challenges. The ziggurat was not built in a single day by a single architect, but brick by brick, level by level, by countless hands working together across many years. In the same way, human civilization itself is not the product of any single breakthrough, but the accumulated result of thousands of small discoveries, innovations, and insights. The Sumerians gave us the foundation stones writing law, urban planning, mathematics, literature, organized religion, systematic agriculture, and the concept of progress itself. But they also gave us something even more valuable, the understanding that such foundations are meant to be built upon. As the night deepens around us, we can see the stars that the Sumerian astronomers once used to create their calendars and navigate their rivers. These same stars have watched over the rise and fall of countless civilizations, have witnessed the spread of Sumerian innovations across the globe, have seen their simple clay tablets evolve into books, their cuneiform script develop into alphabets, their city-states grow into nations, their mathematical systems become the foundation for modern science and technology. The clay tablets that once seemed so humble, so fragile, have proven more durable than the mightiest empires. The ideas they contained have outlasted the bronze weapons that once seemed so formidable, the massive walls that once seemed so impregnable, the great kings who once seemed so powerful. In the end, it was not force that proved most enduring, but knowledge. Not conquest that changed the world, but creativity. Not power that shaped the future, but wisdom. Think for a moment about the tablet of clay that sits in a museum today, covered with the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform script. To most visitors, it might seem like nothing more than a curious artifact, a fragment of ancient history with little relevance to modern life. But you now know better. You understand that this simple tablet represents one of humanity's greatest achievements, the moment when human thought became permanent, when knowledge became portable, when the experiences of one generation could be preserved for all future generations. That tablet contains within it the seeds of every book ever written, every law ever passed, every story ever told. It represents the moment when human beings first realized that they could transcend the limitations of individual memory and create a collective memory for the entire species. In that moment, the Sumerians did not just invent writing, they invented the possibility of cumulative human progress. The same is true of every Sumerian innovation we have explored together. The wheel was not just a solution to the problem of transportation. It was the first step toward every subsequent advance. In engineering and technology, The base 60 mathematical system was not just a way to count and calculate. It was the foundation for all future mathematical thinking. The first cities were not just places where people lived. They were the laboratories where human beings first learned to organize complex societies. As the moon reaches its zenith above the ancient valley, casting its full light on the ruins of Ur and Uruk, we can almost see the ghosts of those first urban dwellers going about their daily lives. The baker rising before dawn to prepare bread for the city. The scribe carefully copying important documents in the temple school. The merchant calculating prices in the bustling marketplace. The farmer checking his irrigation channels in the pre-dawn darkness. The priest climbing the ziggurat steps to greet the rising sun. These were the people who first asked the questions that would shape human civilization. How can we work together? How can we organize our communities? How can we resolve our disputes fairly? How can we preserve our knowledge? How can we improve our lives? How can we create beauty? How can we find meaning in our existence? Their answers were not perfect. Their cities eventually fell. Their empires crumbled. Their languages were forgotten. But their questions remain as relevant today as they were 5,000 years ago. And more importantly, their approach to finding answers through observation, experimentation, collaboration, and persistent effort remains the best method we have for addressing the challenges of our own time. The whispers of the Sumerians reach us across the centuries, not as commands or rigid formulas, but as gentle encouragements. They remind us that human beings are capable of extraordinary things when they work together toward common goals. They show us that the greatest achievements often come not from individual brilliance, but from the patient accumulation of small improvements over many generations. They teach us that civilization is not a natural state, but a continuous choice, requiring constant effort and attention. They demonstrate that progress is possible, but not inevitable. It requires the active participation of people who are willing to imagine a better world and work to create it. As we prepare to leave this ancient valley and return to our own time, we carry with us more than just knowledge about the past. We carry inspiration for the future. We carry the understanding that we are not just passive inheritors of civilization, but active participants in its ongoing creation. We carry the responsibility to build upon the foundation that the Sumerians laid, to ask new questions, to seek new solutions, to face new challenges with the same spirit of curiosity and determination that drove those first urban pioneers. The clay tablets may have crumbled, the ziggurats may have fallen, the great cities may lie buried beneath the desert sand, but the spirit of Sumerian innovation lives on in every human being who refuses to accept the world as it is and works to make it better. It lives on in every teacher who passes knowledge to the next generation, every inventor who solves an ancient problem with a new solution, every citizen who works to make their community more just and prosperous. The night wind carries the scent of the ancient rivers, the whisper of desert sand against weathered stone, the echo of voices that spoke the first words of human civilization. As you settle into peaceful sleep, let these gentle sounds carry you to dreams filled with the infinite possibilities that human creativity can achieve. The Sumerians have given us their greatest gift, the understanding that human beings need not be victims of circumstance, but can be architects of their own destiny. They have shown us that with patience, persistence, and cooperation, we can build cities that last, create knowledge that endures, and leave the world better than we found it in the morning when you wake to the sound of a clock marking time. In Sumerian minutes, when you read words that descended from Sumerian script, when you live in a city planned according to Sumerian principles, remember these ancient voices whispering across the centuries. Remember that you are part of an unbroken chain of human achievement that stretches back to the very beginning of civilization itself. The whispers of the Sumerians will continue to echo through time, carried on the wind that blows across the eternal rivers of Mesopotamia, reminding us that the greatest human adventure is not behind us, but ahead of us, waiting to be written by those who have the courage to dream and the determination to build. Rest now, and let the gentle voices of antiquity carry you into peaceful dreams, knowing that tomorrow you will wake as an heir to the greatest legacy ever left to humanity, the understanding that with wisdom, cooperation, and persistent effort, there is no limit to what human beings can achieve. The moon sets slowly over the ancient valley, but its light continues to shine on the path that the Sumerians first illuminated, the path of human progress, stretching endlessly into the future, beckoning us onward with the promise of wonders yet to be discovered and achievements yet to be accomplished. Sleep well, and dream of the whispers of the Sumerians, still echoing in the moonlight of Mesopotamia, still calling us to greatness.